More than 100 countries, including India, defied US President Donald Trump on Thursday and voted in favor of a United Nations General Assembly resolution calling for the US to drop its recognition of Jerusalem as Israel's capital. Donald Trump had threatened to cut off financial aid to countries that voted in favor. There were some 128 countries that backed the resolution, 9 voted against, 35 abstained. Trump's threat appeared to have some impact, with more countries abstaining and rejecting the resolution than usually associated with Palestinian-related resolutions. India's position has been applauded by most, especially after that recent cautious statement when Donald Trump announced those plans in Jerusalem. Let me introduce my panel to you right away. Joining me in this Delhi studio, Dr. Ava, the Sub Bureau Chief, Al Arabiya TV, needs little introduction. R. Balashankar, member of the BJP, is also with us in the studio. K.C. Singh, former Secretary, Ministry of External Affairs and Coordinator for Counter-Terror, is with us, as is Sanjay Jha of the Congress. Thanks all so much for joining us. K.C. Singh, sir, let me start by asking you, as someone who knows how these things work. Now, when Donald Trump announced those plans of his administration, there was a very, let's say, cautious response by India, one that had raised many eyebrows. Now that the vote has gone the way it has, with India taking the position that we have, is there any surprise? Is there a shift?
There's a slight shift which had taken place a couple of years ago, but I think this is exactly how India should have acted. It's a calibrated approach, because this time, if you see, 4 of the 5 permanent members, all the major countries of Europe, the ones who have abstained basically are smaller countries, Hungary and so on and so forth. So the tide was going the other way. You could see the public opinion, and I think overall it is understood that Trump, by doing this, has actually weakened the attack against radical Islam. He has weakened the possibility of a deal in West Asia, unless he is able to push Israel very quickly. But I think it's a brave move on the part of India, because we've got the Prime Minister of Israel coming, I believe, next month. One interesting thing, Canada was expected to actually vote, was wanting to vote along or against the resolution, but once the threat came, they decided to abstain. So, you know, here is a move that countries, big countries, even medium powers, don't like to be threatened, and I think it was not a good approach. You can threaten small countries, but the big ones will coalesce, and particularly when 4 of the 5 permanent members, including allies of the US, they decide to go against them. And remember, a day earlier or 2 days earlier in the Security Council, it had gone 14-1, the same kind of resolution. Okay. Only one, and US had to veto it. Otherwise, Security Council itself would have passed. So I think India has done the right thing. They're sticking to the middle of the stream on this.
Walk, really,
and it's a principled
that we've now
approach.
got used to about the region. Okay, Mr. Balashankar, coming here at this stage, you know, that really is the response that we are hearing largely. It's being applauded that India has done the right thing, that this is, you know, again, our stated position largely on Palestine, even though we are warming up to Israel, but hello, our relationship with Palestine is one that we cherish. But there are those, interestingly, like Swapan Dasgupta, who have said that it's a matter strictly between the US and Israel, and that India shouldn't have got into this at all, perhaps hinting that maybe we should have abstained.
See, India has always been taking a very principled stand, and on this matter, particularly after Narendra Modi came to power, he has been taking a stand that was very India-centric and very idealistic. So what happens is that we are looking at what is best for India's interest, and we have great relations with the Arab nations, and Saudi Arabia had also cautioned India about the development, and India had to respond in such a way that India had to keep everybody happy. Because India is a major power and India is a growing power, and we have a lot of economic interest in West Asia, and that includes, of course, Israel also. With Israel we have military relations and we are developing it. At the same time, we have to be very careful that we don't want to offend our friends, and we will always stay with the friends. And another thing is that we have a lot of...
You make it sound far easier than I'm sure it actually is to sort of keep everyone happy, especially divided by such deep fissures.
No, see, because there is a lot of economic interest in this. A lot of Western countries, particularly after Modi came to power, UAE has become a major investor in India. So this is a development that is taking place, and India is actually building friendship at all levels.
Okay, Dr. Abbott, come in here at this stage. Now, we know, again, going back to what I asked, saying the fact that when India made that rather cautious statement, we had heard from the Palestinian envoy here also, basically saying in a sense, and I'm paraphrasing here, that he hopes that India will sort of go back and take a more principled stand about the shifting Jerusalem. How do you then see India's position here?
I don't think India changed its position at all regarding the Palestinian issue. It's not a matter of sentiment of the people. It's rather the political, historical. It's abiding by the international community, abiding by UN Security Council resolution, abiding by UN charters. It is occupied territories under the international law. As long as it's occupied territories, you cannot claim that this is a territory taken by force by one country and then you're legitimizing it by agreeing to their own. So there is a principle stand by India, which is recommendable to all the states who have been doing. And I think India, when it said that there is no third party influence, it's a clear indication that India's foreign policy has proved again that it's an independent and it is sovereign nation, that they have been able to say that.
But would you say that there were serious concerns in Arab world watching which way India would go? Or was it just expected that this is the way India would go? So no surprises?
I don't see any surprise, neither now nor before. Indian position has always been there for coexisting between the two nations. Two-state solutions have always supported. India was the first country, non-Arabs, to recognize Palestine as a state. I mean, all these messages to the Arab world is very well taken. And India has taken this stand as an emerging power, as a responsible power. Look at the map. If you look at this map of the world, I mean, if this map was Palestine, the green, prior to 1947 division, if you see, this was Palestine. The UN divided it into two. 55% were given to the Israelis, and 45 was given to the Palestinian majority. Despite the fact, over the years, this portion which was green become white, which has become Israel, and that is the remaining Palestinian, which has become a small state. Now, if I have to see that the cause and the fight between Israel and the Palestinian from the angle of the conflict, I would say that we should go by the UN Charter and UN Security Council resolution in finding a solution, rather than inciting the people and create more extremism and fanatics in the region because of such decision of the Donald Trump.
And I want to, of course, also talk about what this means for peace in the region, all those attempts for peace in the region. I'll come to that in just a bit, but I'm also joined by Ellie Common. She's a senior research scholar, International Institute for Counter-Terrorism. She's joining us this evening from Israel. Thanks, Ellie, for speaking to us. I want to understand what has been the reactions there in Israel. Of course, strong statements we've seen from the Premier, but what have been the reactions? What is the media saying? Is India one of those countries whose reactions, whose positions there at the UN have taken Israel by surprise?
Good evening. I think it was not surprise, because Israel is accustomed to be ostracized by the United Nations. It's not the first time. It's the only state that dozens of decisions of the United Nations and the Security Council have been against Israel. And look to a situation like in Syria or in Iraq. Hundreds of thousands of people killed during the last 2-3 years. How many decisions of the Security Council have been vetoed by China and by Russia and other countries, by the way? And so Israel is accustomed, the Israeli public is accustomed to this kind of decisions, but clearly it is a very sad decision. And I would say that it began already several months ago, when in the UNESCO, which should be the most important cultural universal organization, voted not recognizing the Jewish heritage on the Temple Mount, which all the three religions, not only Judaism, but also the Islam and Christianity, declared that this was a Jewish patrimony. And many European countries, including France, by the way, they voted for not recognizing this right. Okay. And then, after several weeks, the French government said it was a mistake, we regret, and so on, but the decision was there. And I ask myself, for instance, why the Kurdish people, for instance, which has 35 million people, there is no support, not from the great powers and not from minor powers.
Okay, let me get a reaction to that.
Independence, okay? So I think there is an issue of politics. Okay. And I understand
like with everything else in the world. Dr. Abbott, will you respond to that quickly?
Well, I think there is history
I understand
behind every
the
fight
issue
in the
of
world
India.
I mean, why
Sorry.
to bring the regional issues of conflict when you are yourself implementing a Holocaust on the Palestinian? You have expelled 4.4 million Palestinians now. There are now 8 million Palestinians outside the
This
country.
is a Holocaust.
There are
This
4.4.
is a Holocaust. I
This
think
is
you are exaggerating.
I mean, if somebody
this
is
not a
suffering already because of the
Okay.
colonial power, because of the European, they suffered at the hand of them. They had the Holocaust. We sympathize with them as an Arab. I don't see any reason why should you create on the Palestinian the suffering you have done.
Which is again.
I mean, Israel. Let me give you one figure from the Israeli. The Israeli figure has given us. And prior to 1911, there was only 5,000 Jewish in Jerusalem. Now, with currently there are 82% of them are Jew. Then how these people came?
Okay. Let me just respond to that. Yeah.
First of all, remember that the Arabs and the Muslims, they conquered Jerusalem and the Holy Land in 620 something. Okay, it's not that they came there by peace with a sword. But now about the Palestinians, as you said, they did not recognize the partition in 1947. They didn't want, and the Arabs didn't want to make peace in 1967. There were declarations at the Arab summit, no negotiations, no peace, no recognition. So who is responsible for this kind of behavior of the Palestinians and of the Arabs?
Okay.
I am staunchly in favor of
this again perhaps underscoring the challenge task at hand. But before I go across to Sanjay Jha, K.C. Singh, come in here at this stage very quickly as someone who's familiar with diplomacy and how it works. What are the kind of pressures do you believe that India has had to face from the US ahead of this vote?
I think that Trump, first of all, the Trump decision was motivated by internal issues. Because
I was just addressing that question to Mr. Singh here. Go ahead, K.C. Singh.
Look, I'm sure US must have lobbied. Incidentally, this was not an issue between Israel and the rest of the world, unlike earlier resolutions. This was an issue between US and the rest of the world, because they were taking exception to US doing something which they thought is in contravention of Security Council resolutions, as Dr. Awad said, 224, 336, and it was altering the status quo without any progress on West Asia peace. So everybody felt you don't reward another country with something which would be part of a final solution. And that is why even the 4 permanent members turned against them. And incidentally, I've never seen before, this is the second time after International Court of Justice election, where even the permanent members are willing to draw another permanent member before the General Assembly and embarrass it.
Right.
So, in a sense, the power of the General Assembly is increasing, which is
That's
good for us.
Good point.
So you go along with it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Let me get Sanjay Jha in at this point. Sanjay Jha, this is, of course, the one issue which has sort of seen applause, or at least across the board, from everyone standing up. For instance, Shashi Tharoor, of course, said that there is no change, and this is the way he would expect India this is the position he would expect India to take.
If you permit me, I think that for
absolutely,
just one moment.
I think there was a lot of perhaps media speculation or.
Go ahead. Go ahead.
Natasha, I believe there was a lot of speculation only because maybe when Prime Minister Modi went to Israel, he did not visit the Palestinian Authority. So maybe some people read too much into it. But, I mean, as Mr. K.C. Singh rightly pointed out, I mean, anybody knows that the final settlement, as and when it happens between Israel and Palestine, I mean, one of the crucial aspects which then I think demands the settlement is Jerusalem. So I think, this is something that international powers, everyone who's a stakeholder has more or less accepted that as an unwritten code which will be followed and adhered to. And I think the critical point here is this, that, end of day, I think everybody recognizes, looking at the violent incidents that have already happened ever since Mr. Donald Trump made an announcement on December 6th about, transferring Jerusalem, making that the capital of Israel. But remember, I think, Mr. Trump is very wishy-washy. He's also, Natasha, made statements that after that end of day, the US government will probably move its embassy to Jerusalem only in 2020. So, there is perhaps a lot of political fluidity emerging there.
Okay.
And last but not the least, I think we all know that Donald Trump is ultimately not really concerned or doesn't even understand West Asia peace. He's basically playing to his domestic vote bank politics.
Okay. Okay, and you've taken us an important point, the question that we are asking, should we be concerned at displeasing the US here. Just look at the kind of comments about Shankar that we've heard. I mean, Nikki Haley spoke out very strongly, talking about, the US will remember this day in which it was singled out for attack in the General Assembly for the very act of exercising our right as a sovereign nation. We will remember it when we are called upon to once again make contributions and people come calling to us. So is that concern, or is that just a media creation? Or will our diplomats sort it out?
As far as India is concerned, we have been very clear in our mind that we are not going into any power bloc. We are not part of the US lobby, we are not part of any other lobby. So we have been very clear about that. And secondly, India is not one of the countries which is dependent on aid from America. We are actually having a nation-to-nation relation. It's a bilateral relation.
We are embracing America in a sense.
No,
we are reaching out.
There are a lot of areas of concurrence in international diplomacy, and also because now that US has become the biggest power bloc, there is a kind of concurrence, and particularly on issue of terrorism, for example, relations to Pakistan. But even in issues with Pakistan, whenever it came to India's interest and Pakistan's interest, America also has taken sides with Pakistan because of their alliance with them. So it is not that India has to play along with the US.
Okay.
India is playing a role.
We're not aligning ourselves, you're saying, with anyone. We are perhaps what they call a strategic autonomy. This is exactly it. But before I wrap, I want to sort of come back to another key question. What about peace in the region? We've seen the US really has sort of taken the lead in trying to get peace in the region. Now with this, has any of that changed? How drastically?
I think it should bring peace to the region. See, Jerusalem is an international issue. It's nothing to do with Israel and the Palestinian. It is claimed by the Jewish, it's a claim by the Christian, it's a claim by the Muslim. Everybody have a claim on the city. We agree on that. What we are trying to say here is that you cannot annihilate a nation because you don't consider anybody for peace for you, a broker, to deal with the peace, and you annihilate the whole of Palestine, expel them in a systematic way, bring the Jewish only to the state, creating a Jewish state in the heart of Palestine, denying the rest of it. That's a very unlawful way of doing it.
Okay.
End occupation, end a settlement, go for peace.
I see what you're saying, but you're saying that you don't believe that there's any setback as far as the peace is concerned. The question could be what really is the progress, but you're saying that there's no setback either.
There is a stallment here. We need the international community to see the forefront that this kind of unsettlement in the Middle East is creating more. We may go for a third world war.
Okay, I'll let you respond to that before I wrap. Carmen, what about peace in the region? How do you see that going forward? Dr. says that not really. If anything, of course, that could perhaps stabilize things.
First of all, I think that the decision of President Trump does not recognize Jerusalem as a united city, which Israel should be the capital of Israel. He spoke realistically about the fact that Israel has the right, at least in West Jerusalem, to has his capital. He didn't speak something about the final issue of Jerusalem. He said that the final solution for Jerusalem will be in negotiations between the Palestinians and the Israelis. So this is a realpolitik, if you want. Now, on the ground, I think the reactions in the Arab world, if you look to the reactions in the Arab world, are very muted. And if you look to Saudi Arabia, by the way, the decision of the Saudi Arabians to be very, very low-key, because there is a secret negotiations with the Saudis and some of their allies, like the Egyptians and other Gulf countries, for instance, in order to advance the peace negotiations.
Okay.
And the problem is possibly that the declaration of Trump came before this plan, which is an American-Egyptian Saudi or American-Saudi-Egyptian plan. Should be
You're once again underscoring for us the challenge really of finding any solution, finding any peace is exactly, of course, the positions which can we find peace, and what sort of impact moves like this have. That is the big question. But thank you all so much for your time. I'm completely out of time on the program, but thanks for joining us on this evening.